There is a procurement mechanism called the Other Transaction Authority. It appears in no acquisition rulebook you have ever read, and the Pentagon used it to spend $23 billion in a single year without competitive bids, without standard disclosure, and without leaving the public record that every other federal purchase requires. It has existed since 1958. You were never told. The Federal Acquisition Regulation is the rulebook for how the government buys things. All 1,700 pages of it. It mandates competition. It mandates price transparency. It mandates disclosure. There is a statute called the Truth in Negotiations Act that says if the government pays you, you open your books. These rules exist because public money, in theory, cannot be spent in secret. The far is the wall between taxpayer dollars and private backroom arrangements. Every agency, every department, every contracting officer is supposed to live inside it. The Other Transaction Authority, codified under Title 10 of the United States Code, is the door in that wall. It lets the Department of Defense enter into agreements that are not contracts, not grants, and not cooperative agreements. They are called in the statute other transactions, and because they are none of those named things, the entire regulatory structure built around them does not apply. Here is how something this consequential happened without a floor vote specifically creating it. In 1958, Congress passed the National Aeronautics and Space Act. Buried inside it was a clause giving NASA authority to enter into other transactions with non-traditional partners, companies that didn't want to deal with government procurement red tape. The logic was speed. The space race was on. Rules were a liability. In 1989, Congress handed the same authority to DARPA. In 1994, it was extended quietly to all of the Department of Defense. In 2016, Section 815 of the National Defense Authorization Act expanded it again, broader scope, fewer restrictions, easier access for companies that had never done business with the government before. Every expansion was attached to must-pass defense legislation. No standalone hearing on the mechanism itself. No senator stood and said, "We are building a parallel procurement economy outside every acquisition rule ever written." It grew in the margins of other bills, attached to annual defense spending votes that had to pass regardless. And now it is a complete parallel system, operating alongside the official one, invisible from the outside, enormous on the inside. Who controls it? Not the oversight bodies. The Government Accountability Office has explicitly ruled it lacks jurisdiction to review most OTA protests. A company that loses out on one of these agreements cannot appeal through the Board of Contract, appeals the way it could with a standard contract. The standard competitive protest rights do not exist here. Decisions rest with a small number of designated officials inside the Pentagon whose choices are shielded from the review architecture that governs every other federal dollar. That architecture was built for contracts. These are not contracts, so the architecture does not reach them. Remember, no one voted for this gap to exist. Here is what that power means in practice. The Pentagon awards an OTA agreement to a defense startup. No public solicitation. No requirement that other companies were given a fair chance to compete. No disclosure of the price negotiated. That startup is not required to be on the standard contractor registry. It did not certify its cost data under the Truth in Negotiations Act. It did not comply with the small business subcontracting requirements embedded in standard procurement rules. It did not follow the labor standards and compliance certifications that a normal federal contract carries by law. The agreement is real. The money is real. But because the agreement is another transaction, the contract award notice that normally becomes searchable in the federal procurement data system, the database journalists and watchdogs use to track where defense money goes, may be minimal, delayed, or filed in a category that a FOIA request cannot easily surface. Multiply that by $23 billion in one fiscal year, across hundreds of agreements most of the public has never heard of. And here is the part that should actually worry you: it is completely legal. The Inspector General has flagged misuse. The GAO has published reports. Congressional staffers have written memos. None of it changes the underlying authority because the underlying authority is statute. It is law. To close the door, Congress would have to pass new legislation specifically targeting OTA. But the only vehicle large enough to carry that change is the annual National Defense Authorization Act, the same bill that expanded OTA authority 4 separate times. Defense contractors benefiting from OTA agreements have no interest in restricting it. The agencies using it have no interest in restricting it. And the bill that could close the gap is the same one that widened it every time someone looked closely. This is not corruption. It is structure. The mechanism was designed to be self-reinforcing. That is what makes it permanent. If the most scrutinized purchasing institution in the federal government, the one with auditors, inspectors general, multiple congressional oversight committees, and a 1,700-page rulebook, can operate a parallel spending economy outside all of it, the question becomes systemic. What other authorizing statutes contain carve-outs that function the same way? What other transactions exist under different names, in different departments, for different purposes? The FAR was never the floor of federal spending. It was always the rulebook for the spending you were allowed to see. The money you can find in the public record is not all the money being spent. The agreements you can search are not all the agreements being signed. And if the most watched institution in government has a gap this large built into its foundation, what are the agencies no one is watching using?